She never expected the Attorney General to come after her by name on national television, but that's exactly what happened. In a Fox News appearance, Pam Bondi turned her sights on Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, accusing her of dangerous rhetoric and demanding an apology. Crockett wasn't about to let that moment pass quietly, and she chose the most public stage possible to respond. What she said next turned a cable news jab into a full-blown Capitol Hill showdown. Stick around, because this fight over free speech and political power is far from over.
And I first just want to begin with a news alert. Guess what? Joe Biden is not the president anymore. So maybe we can move on. Maybe we can move into the present, because it seems like we are living in the past. And listen, these are not the good old days, you know, like you used to sit around and your grandparents would talk to you about what used to happen. What we need to be talking about is how we are going to legislate, because I think that some of my colleagues have confused what our jobs are. And I get that we're sitting in judiciary. And so it may seem as if we are here to be litigators, but we are here to be legislators, which means that we are supposed to be writing laws, not trying to have our own trials and determine whether or not something is true or not, or whatever the case is, or who should be sued, who shouldn't be sued. All I know is that a great American hero, a good senator out of New Jersey, said something to the effect yesterday as he was shattering the record for holding the floor, a record that had been held by another racist in this country. As he shattered that, he said something about the fact that this should not be about left versus right. It should be about right versus wrong. And I am going to tell you that I want us to focus on right versus wrong. The reason that we are struggling right now in this country as it relates to people not trusting agencies, honestly, a lot of it is because of elected leaders. Let me tell you, one of the things that the chairman and I actually agree upon, we don't agree on a lot, is that we both know that there has been a sharp incline as it relates to threats upon our lives. Regardless of what side of the aisle you sit on, we both know and agree that as sitting members of Congress, we both are enduring more death threats than anybody should in this country. And I believe that it is because of the divisive rhetoric, and it is because of the selective enforcement of things. And so when we have, and I'm gonna be clear, because I had remarks and I'm going a whole other way.
A new exchange involving Representative Jasmine Crockett and Attorney General Pam Bondi has quickly become a focal point in Washington's ongoing political debate. What began with comments made during a Fox News appearance has expanded into a broader discussion about political rhetoric, public accountability, and the boundaries of official communication. As both figures draw significant attention, the controversy is generating intense reactions across traditional media and social platforms
in this country, and people are watching and they are consuming this information, and they are believing that simply because I decided that I wanted to exercise my right to free speech, which I am not abridged from doing, that she then wanted to then politicize something that should not be politicized. I don't like Elon Musk. I'm gonna say it 50,000 times. I don't like him. I don't like that he going out there and he firing people. I think that he's a crook, because somehow the rest of us can't sit around and get whatever federal contracts we want. The rest of us can't sit around and get law enforcement and get them somehow ordained as federal law enforcement to protect him. The rest of us can't get our dealerships protected by the federal government. That is somebody that is operating above the law. For whatever reason, just because he has a lot of money, more money than everybody else. And yes, I am happy to see that on my birthday, which is what I said, there were peaceful protests around this world against him, because he is a problem. And so you never should have somebody that is sitting that high and is going to sit up here and threaten a sitting member of Congress when she knew good and well, if she watched the entire thing, that I specifically told protesters to make sure you consult with lawyers, just like I've told protesters over and over and over in the history of me advising people to go out and exercise their constitutional right. The fact that there are other sitting members that have received letters of threat from this new DOJ tells me that they are about retribution and they are not about following the law.
Political disputes often intensify when emotionally charged language enters the conversation, and this latest exchange between Jasmine Crockett and Attorney General Pam Bondi illustrates exactly why. Claims that a public statement amounted to a threat naturally attract attention, but determining whether that characterization is accurate requires examining the complete remarks rather than relying on isolated headlines or short video clips.
Somebody calls and says, hey, I need you to investigate this cybercrime, or I need you to investigate this child pornography, or I need you to investigate this robbery. Then we want somebody to show up, and we don't want them to look at us and act as if just because I'm black or because I'm woman that I am not worthy of having that case investigated, because we have an administration that is continuously railing against diversity, equity, and inclusion, or we don't need people that show up that feel like diversity should not be valued. That is why we should have somebody that may show up and looks like me. The final thing that I'll say, because you've been gracious, is this. When I first became a public defender, I had no criminal defense experience. And I walked in and I told my boss, Charlie, I said, listen, you should hire me. He said, why? I said, because I'm black. Charlie looked at me like I was crazy. And I said, let me tell you something. When I walk in, I'm going to walk in with a level of rapport and understanding that maybe some of my other colleagues will not. Charlie offered me my job, and I worked my butt off, and I worked really, really hard for all of my clients, not just those that look like me. And that is what it looks like to serve. Thank you.
The clash between Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett and Attorney General Pam Bondi has become one of the more talked about flashpoints in Washington this year, and it all traces back to a Fox News appearance that Crockett says crossed a line. During a segment with Sean Hannity, Bondi accused Crockett of stoking dangerous rhetoric against Elon Musk, tying the Congresswoman's public criticism of the billionaire to a wave of vandalism targeting Tesla dealerships. Bondi went further, suggesting that Crockett needed to apologize to Tesla shareholders and to the country, framing the Congresswoman's words as something bordering on incitement. For Crockett, having the nation's top law enforcement official publicly link her to violence on a national television platform wasn't just an insult, it was something she characterized as a threat, and she wasn't going to let it slide quietly. What makes this story worth unpacking is the venue Crockett chose to respond in. She didn't fire back on social media or through a press release. She stood up during a House Judiciary Committee hearing and used her time to directly address Bondi's comments in a formal, on-the-record setting. That distinction matters. A congressional hearing carries weight and permanence that a tweet doesn't, and by raising the issue there, Crockett forced the moment into the official record, making clear that she saw this as more than a political sideshow. She argued that Bondi, given her position as the country's top prosecutor, has an outsized ability to shape public perception, and that using that platform to imply she was inciting violence was an abuse of that influence rather than a legitimate exercise of it. Crockett's core defense centered on free speech, and she was unambiguous about it. She maintained that criticizing a public figure like Musk, someone deeply entangled in federal policy through his role advising on government spending cuts, is squarely within her rights as an elected official, and that nothing she said amounted to a call for physical harm. She pushed back specifically on the idea that expressing dislike for Musk's influence equates to endorsing violence against him or his companies, drawing a sharp line between political criticism and incitement. That distinction is at the heart of why this dispute resonates beyond the two people involved, because it touches on a much bigger question about where legitimate political dissent ends and where accountability for rhetoric begins, a debate that shows up constantly in modern political discourse. There's also a power dynamic here that's hard to ignore. Crockett pointed out that Musk has enjoyed extraordinary protection and access under the current administration, essentially operating with a level of legal and political insulation that ordinary citizens, or even most public officials, simply don't have. Her argument wasn't just about defending her own comments. It was about highlighting what she sees as a double standard, where criticism of an ordinary person might be shrugged off, but criticism of someone with Musk's proximity to power triggers a response from the Justice Department itself. That reframing is strategically smart because it shifts the conversation away from "did Crockett go too far?" and toward "why is the Attorney General weaponizing her office to defend one billionaire's reputation?" Stepping back, this confrontation is a useful window into how charged the relationship between free expression and political power has become right now. Whether or not you agree with Crockett's politics, the underlying question she's raising is a serious one. Should the nation's top law enforcement officer be using a cable news platform to characterize a sitting member of Congress's criticism as dangerous, especially when that characterization could shape how millions of viewers perceive her? Bondi's supporters will argue she was simply calling out rhetoric she believed was reckless in the wake of real vandalism, and that's a fair point worth weighing too. But Crockett's decision to respond on the record, calmly and directly, rather than escalate emotionally, is what turned this from a one-day news cycle into a moment people are still dissecting. It's a reminder that in today's media environment, how you respond to a perceived attack can matter just as much as the attack itself.